So welcome back to 3rd Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and we are continuing with the clutch of siege battles that were given to me by Winged Swordsman 44. And again, we're continuing our grand tour really of maps that we haven't seen in a good long while. This is a map that I have shown once before. I can't remember the designation that I gave it back then. I don't think it's actually got a name as such in the lore, but it looks like a large-scale dwarven archaeological excavation really, doesn't it? But regardless of what it may be in that sense, we are going to be seeing it held by the forces of evil today, and the forces of good are going to have to try and wrest back control of this particular area. Maybe, I mean, you could suggest maybe it's a Rhudaur settlement given the human buildings that are here at the back, but I doubt that Rhudaur would have the ability to build anything so impressive, and these are certainly not natural formations. Irregardless of what they may or may not be, though, the forces of darkness do hold on to them, and the forces of light want to take them away. It's a very large settlement, of course, so not all aspects of the map are going to be seen. In fact, I would suggest the main, or the first outer defences are probably going to be abandoned pretty quickly. Again, this represents a time in development of Reforged where these maps were made and they were so vast that even with the maximum number of players you couldn't really fill them, and the defenders rather rightly are going to be deploying a little bit further back, but of course still plenty of map to work with irregardless of that. And it's probably for the best we're not seeing the very outer defences being used because of how narrow they are. But yes, we shall start off with the attackers, which for once is going to be the forces of good, and we can start off as well with the players setting the battle replay as a result of that, who is going to be playing as Arthedain, of course, Winged Swordsman 44 himself. Arthedain on the attack are a fairly different proposition to what they are on the defence. On the defence, of course, they can dig in with their efficient pikemen, they're very nice to use archers, and then a few bits of quality both on horseback and on foot here and there to try and make them a very efficient fighting force. This does translate somewhat to how they can behave when they're on the attack as well. Certainly they are very, very capable of dominating initial skirmishes. Depending on what sort of position they can take up within the canyon system ahead will determine how efficient units like the Emerdim archers and the upgraded Arthedain marksmen just in behind them are truly capable of being. But it's kind of a no-brainer to bring them as Arthedain, to be honest with you. It's very rare that you'll see Arthedain forego units such as this because of how easy they can be to use. Just in behind them we see a combination of fully upgraded Arthedain men-at-arms, which when you're on the attack to be fair, in a 4v4, the individual attacking armies will actually have a little bit more quality, but even so, efficiency is the name of the game, and certainly when you're taking that initial damage, having these armour-clad infantry units that aren't too expensive is one way you can do that. The Dunedain Rangers, of course, if you can get them into a good position as the attackers, you make life very, very difficult for the defenders to try and recover from any blows that you are capable of dealing. We shall see if they are capable of getting them into a good position, or whether the attackers can maintain their formation and snuff them out. Dunedain Peacekeepers, given that Rhudaur is one of the defenders and several of the forces of evil are going to be reliant on their more numerous, less defensively minded units on an individual level, this is exactly where one-handed axemen can come in very handy because they can mow through chaff like nobody's business. Dunedain Peacekeepers are very, very good for that. More Arthedain men-at-arms just in behind. We'll get onto those units over there in just a second. Dismounted Fornoster Rhine Knights can really do, or Rain Knights I should say, really do the same sort of thing as the Dunedain Peacekeepers, only they are more offensively focused given the fact that they don't have access to that shield, although they do have better armour value, so it's really a bit of a trade-off, to be honest with you, on what kind of opposition you expect them to be coming up against. Given that this is a siege where Arthedain are on the attack, having a shield would be nice to mitigate any arrow fire they perceive, but to be honest, it doesn't really matter. Both of them are good against the same kind of foes in melee. More Peacekeepers back there. We do have the Wardens of the North. The Wardens of the North are monstrous in melee as well. They're heavy swordsmen, much like the Dismounted Knights just next to them, but they're even better. The very best that the Dunedain have to offer. Their armour-piercing arrows and their steel bows as well are a very dangerous thing for opposition armies to have to try and deal with, and obviously their multiple HP nature makes that difficult. Dismounted Knights for Numenor are the best that it gets for Arthedain in terms of a dedicated infantry unit. They're relatively basic in terms of what they offer. They are just a big brick of metal and HP, so yeah, they're going to be the sort of thing which when they're committed, Arthedain are going to be able to withstand a lot of punishment on that front line. We also have some Arthedain pikemen, naturally again with the breastplate armour upgrade to try and mitigate their main weakness, which is going to be projectiles, of course. Arthedain pikemen going to be a good anchor for the line, and of course excuse me, some Dunedain Troll Slayers here as well, which also offer a multiple HP Dunedain unit. They're not quite as well rounded in melee as the Wardens of the North, but they do have armor piercing, to be fair, and their projectiles are just as devastating as their steel bow wielding brethren. Also some civilians to help round out the force there. Just coming in through the main entranceway to this little canyon system, we have Fire Captain Les McBurney, who's playing as Cardlin. He's got some mercenary crossbowmen and some fast movers. I mean, to be fair, there is a fair amount of room within the canyon system itself, so maybe cavalry will be useful. Mercenary crossbows, of course, are capable of dishing out a fair amount of punishment with their projectiles as well. Not that Cardlan really need that though, they've got their foot-pound projectiles as well, so we'll see how useful they are likely to be. Speaking of which, we have the Minhiriath Sharpshooters, some hidden bandits in and amongst them as well for some basic jabbies. But the Minhiriath Sharpshooters are a mainstay in any Cardolan army. The stopping power of crossbows, attacker or defender, can be so useful, and then of course they pull out maces, which makes them a good auxiliary armor piercing unit when all is said and done as well. Just in behind we have the Dunedain Captains, kind of a diet variant of the Wardens of the North we saw over in Arthedain, but they should be very effective at dealing with several of the defending units today. But again, when you decide to deploy them is obviously going to be all important, because the Dunedain, they're kind of the halfway house really between humans and elves in terms of how they behave mechanically, and that means that they are slightly less numerous. Again, they don't tend to rely on armour quite so much perhaps, and that could be to their detriment when they have to advance into a well-prepared enemy position. Greenway Garrison footmen, in much the same way as the Dunedain we just mentioned, Cardolan tend to focus a little bit more on numbers and efficiency with their funds than Arthedain, and that is seen here in the Greenway Garrison footmen in comparison to the Arthedain pikemen, but very numerous, very important to Cardolan as well to mitigate some of their weaknesses they have on the front line. Minhiriath archers, kind of similar to the Arthedain marksmen we saw as well, going to be useful for skirmishing with the enemy. Some Gwathlo trackers are hidden, so plenty of projectiles here for Cardolan, which is perhaps not too surprising. They can bring a lot of them, and they can be efficient with them as well. A trebuchet is an interesting pick. Depending on where the defenders decide to deploy, the trebuchet could be all important as well. And we have some Minotaur Roman gatekeepers here at the back, a combination of a halberdier and a crossbowman as well. A higher tier variant all round really of the Minhiriath sharpshooters we've already seen. And another unit of Merc crossbows to boot. I think that's just about it. There's some Thieves of Tharbad hidden as well. Then we move on to the Womb Raider, who is playing as Numenor, so they have yet to succumb to their darkness at the moment. Balagai footmen are a basic unit of spears. When you're on the attack, this kind of unit, for the same reason as the Arthedain men-at-arms we've already mentioned, can be fairly priceless, just because you don't mind sending them in. They're reasonably tanky against the forms of attack that the defenders will throw at them first. We shall see though. Balagai pikemen, actually, they have the armour upgrade, which I'm not sure, maybe I would have been tempted to give that to the spears, given they're going to be used probably a little bit more freely. But the Balagai pikemen, much in the same way as the Arthedain pikemen, having the armour upgrade does mitigate their most obvious weaknesses in a few ways. Balagai footmen again, a Numenorian cohort with some Numenorian shield guard, again the classic combination of high damage, very high end line infantry, more defensive but armour piercing spears make the Numenorian infantry force, as we've seen several times lately actually, very effective indeed. The sort of thing which certainly when Numenor have got a quality edge, which in a 4v4 on the attack, as I've mentioned, you will have. It's the sort of thing which will make the defenders a little bit nervous. Balagai archers, Arthedain shadowbows are hidden as well, so the Numenorian skirmish force not their main focus, but they can certainly throw hands, as it were, with Balagai archers skirmishing and the Arthedain doing a ton of damage. Plenty of seafarers, as I've mentioned a few times. An ideal auxiliary unit, very damaging with their javelins, but it can also muck in as a medium tier axe infantry unit. Got some Pharazim swordmasters and some Numenorian steel bows back here as well. Fantastic heavy swordsmen, armor piercing archers, which may not have the armor, or the ammo I should say, as the same to the same extent as the Wardens of the North, but still. And last but by no means least, we have Hertumihai, who is going to be playing as Dorwinion. Plenty of Elvelyn units, Elvelyn infantry, Elvelyn marksmen. There's going to be some Elvelyn Vanguard in there as well for that basis of Dorwinion. You know, just that really efficient, heavily armoured, and also, you know, fairly high stamina units which can keep up the attack for a long time. All of the attacking armies have got access to that, but it means that all of them have also got some sort of weakness to armour piercing. We'll see what the defenders have brought in that regard. But Dorwinion also have elven units which are not quite so vulnerable in that regard. Morroquendi bows are here. Poison projectiles can be useful against evil forces. Morroquendi pikes, probably the single best unit of pikes we've seen from the attackers, actually, seeing as no Wardens of Tir Gorthad, no Numenor Gate Guards. Even then, I think the elven pikes will probably have a little bit of an edge there. Morroquendi or no. Elvelyn Hammerguard are in there for armour piercing infantry unit. I'd be very surprised to not see the Glade Lords as well. Dorwinion, of course, very capable of bringing a few hidden units. Now then, Just across the way we have Son of the Dunedain, who's playing as the Fallen Numenorian faction here, Umbar. They've got a few units here, but they're very likely to be overwhelmed completely by Dorwinion very early on. So we'll see if these Belagai pikemen and Belagai footmen, which we've already seen, of course, clad in the blue of Numenor earlier on. Another very similar unit is the Corsair Blackguards, very similar, of course, to the Seafarers of Nindamos. You see them a little bit less, though, perhaps because of the strengths that Umbar can call upon other than their javelins, but we shall see. Plenty of routes through the canyons over here. The rest of the Umbar army is, as soon as we manage to see them, there we are. We've got Belagai footmen, Naru Royal Guard, Corsair infantry, so plenty of archers. Of course, they're going to have to compromise in terms of quality in some areas, but I'm not surprised to see Umbar going for the Alcaron Mass Legion to try and mitigate that somewhat. Positioning all of these archers is going to be absolutely vital to their chances of victory here as we move towards the middle of the map. Actually, we're moving straight on, so Umbar must have some hidden units, I would suggest. But we have Tintin, who is playing as Mordor. He's got some Orc Javelins and some Temple Guard, plenty of armor-piercing projectiles of various tiers. We also have some Orc Archers as well. Like I mentioned, projectiles are going to be very important on this kind of map for the defenders to try and equalise on that quality, and that goes for Mordor as well, even if it may not be their first among their strengths. Orc fodder are here. We've got some Ranon infantry as well. So basic units first and foremost. This is the kind of thing which will be effective against the attackers, as I've mentioned. The Sauron's Will. We have the Temple Executioners back there, a very high-end unit of heavy swordsmen. Olag High and Nazgul as well. More Sauron's Will. Some Orc Maulers as well to help pad out that armor piercing just a little bit more. Interesting to go for the Blackguard of Barad-dûr on the defence. More often than not, I'd be more tempted to go for the Minas Morgul Chosen, because, as I've mentioned, the Great Shield Infantry does have some shortcomings in melee, but we'll see how well they perform here. There is a unit way back here, which is actually Hixgru, who is playing as Rhudaur. It's his unit of Witch Realm Enslavers, which may very well be very important to the defenders, given their armour-piercing strengths. Some Arthedain Pikemen and Arthedain Berserkers as well, two other very important units for Rhudaur. It's very likely Rhudaur are going to have most of their army hidden, given their roster. We've got a couple of units of Rhudaur marksmen deploying those stakes. I doubt that the mercenary crossbowmen will be so accommodating as to charge right into them, but you never know. I've seen worse happen. Rhudaur swordsmen, Dunman spearmen, Rhudaur clansmen with the armour upgrade as well. So all of these units are going to be fairly numerous, good for clogging up these narrow passageways for potentially the Arthedain Berserkers and stuff like these Etenmoor's Troll Hunters to lay down their fast and very devastating armour-piercing javelins. Dunman spearmen, a couple of units of Rhudaur clansmen and swordsmen dotted around here and there as well. And last, but by no means least, we have Harad, played by Darthy Darth. He has got some Southron archers again, clogging up these little gaps with stakes. I mean, it's unlikely that they're going to be hyper effective, but I mean, it's the sort of thing which you never know. So you may as well deploy them, and his army is actually in one giant blob with Southron Warband. Of course, the Trollman, another unit that we've seen be brutally effective lately, a must-bring in this situation, given the opponents are who they are. The Trollmen, to be fair, even against factions they're not going to be super effective against, because of... You want to bring the Trollmen, and Harad very, very often do. Champions of Nafrat for the same reasons, because they're just the buffed version, basically. More Southrons, more Muhards, some Serpent Guard with the armour upgrades in there as well. Could be some hidden Ashari here and there. But Harad, another faction which can obviously pack on the javelins and throwing projectiles to a fairly high extent as well, just like Rhudaur. So that could be one way in which the defenders deal with the heavy-duty nature of all of the attackers today, because it's going to be a bit of a struggle, and I do think the defenders will live and die basically on where they decide to set up and what sort of supporting units they have in place for their front lines. It comes down to a battle of pure might. I do think the attackers are going to take this one home, even with the numbers and quality that Mordor and Umbar can bring to the field when they're working in tandem. I think, given the quality levels are what they are, the defenders are going to have an interesting job. But again, a 4v4 is easier to manage than a 4v3 or a 5v3, so we shall have to wait and see. I'll make a little bit of a cut, because there is a fair amount of land that the attackers have to traverse before they start to attack the defenders, and I imagine the defenders are going to shuffle themselves around a bit as well, so I'll make a cut, and we shall rejoin when the battle is about to get underway.
Well, this has the potential to get pretty messy pretty quickly. It was actually a larger cut than I was expecting there at the start of the battle, but we can see the Casimir's Rangers have taken up position, and because the Dorwinion army is still in the blob it was initially in, the Casimir's Rangers actually have a very good opportunity to get a lot of heavy damage done to Dorwinion before they ever really get to the bridge. Now, there is a trade-off in the fact that you can see the Morroquendi bows are already starting to cut down the Casimir's Rangers, but surely based on how densely packed these Dorwinion forces are, this is going to be a worthwhile trade. Something else which has happened as well is a little scouting movement from the mercenary crossbowmen here on the Rhudaur army. There was actually no movement at all for the vast majority of this cut, which is why I'm a little bit confused as to why it was even a thing. But yeah, very, very strange. Even so, the battle is sort of slowly starting to get underway here, simmering away as the mercenary crossbowmen start to fire a few pot shots into the Rhudaur forces, but they won't mind too much here. It's only losing a few gunmen spearmen, and even though it's a 4v4, so even these lower tier units are going to be important for the defenders here in terms of their ability to hold the line. They're going to need something to take the punishment that the attackers are willing to give out with their ranged units. Speaking of which, we have a unit of Southron archers up here guarding the pass which Winged Swordsman is using with pretty much the entirety of his forces. A few units that are going to be heading to the middle as well, but a large portion of the Arthedain army is going to be taking this position and trying to flank into the side here, with Harad and Rhudaur now consolidating their position, but in so doing they may have given a little bit of impetus to Arthedain to try and take this high ground over here, and then they can shoot down into the rear of the Rhudaur position, which will facilitate an advance through the middle. See here the mercenary crossmen already in position, the Rhudaur marksmen now also starting to fire away. Arthedain marksmen starting to shoot across. This is the thing with this map, with the varying levels of terrain. Both sides are going to be able to at least get onto the high ground at some point, though the defenders should be able to dictate how easy that is for the attackers. Lumbermen also moving forward from Cardlan. The initial scouting parties from Numenor starting to move forward as well, and try and claim some high ground of their own, and move along here to try and attack Mordor, who are within this trench. Meanwhile, Umbar getting along over here. Plenty of dead units, including Corsair infantry, but a few of those ranger volleys that have already been deployed. Haven't used all of the ammunition in that unit either, certainly not. So Dorwinion already with a little bit of damage done. And still here, it's just one unit of Southron archers. It's weird to see how scattered some of these defensive positions are, with just one unit here and there. Able to get a pretty decent amount of damage done, but more, and things starting to fall silent a little bit as well, with all of the archers starting to maybe conserve their shots a little bit as the Arthedain marksmen have retreated just a tad. You can see over here that Corsair infantry are moving over to this side of the cliff. It could shoot down into Numenor, but I mean, I'm very surprised honestly that Dorwinion are not starting to, I mean they are now with some Elvelyn Vanguard starting to cross the bridges. Purely because they do have the opportunity to. It's not the entirety of the Umbar force here by any means. So they really do need to start putting the pressure on, I think, because this little force could end up getting overwhelmed, and that's too much of the... It's simultaneously not enough to stop Dorwinion, but it's too much to lose for no good reason. And Dorwinion do have the opportunity to make that the case here. Crossbow bolt volleys coming in. And that will do a lot of damage to the Elvelyn Vanguard. You can see many of them falling, but again, if Dorwinion are going to lose a unit, then their basic spears will be what they choose. Of course, though, their armour not really going to be all that effective, given the crossbow bolts and javelins that they are currently facing. And indeed, that unit has taken tons of damage. I'm not really convinced about only sending 2 of these units across. You need the entirety of your army to overwhelm this defensive position. With only 2 units, that is exactly the sort of thing that Umbar would have been hoping to see. And doubtless Dorwinion will be punished for their foolishness. Casimir's rangers are there. Numenor steadily making their way forward. Still, this really is the only part of the battlefield so far where a huge amount of action has been happening. The rest has been almost like the attackers slowly making their way through the canyons as if to try and root out any trickery that the defenders may have laid on, but I don't think in Mordor's case that will be all that easy. I mean, they've already posted up into a good position here. Numenor are there. I highly doubt that Numenor are going to start advancing through this way, given the way that they've already set up. And we do have a bit of a melee engagement here. The Lumbermen going into the Dunman Spearmen. I mean, the Lumbermen are going to be able to do more damage in melee, but they're also a very weak unit in terms of their ability to stay alive, and I think they're taking ranged fire from somewhere, but irregardless of that, the Dunman Spearmen should just about be victorious. I mean, it's going to be very close. The Dunedain captains are right here as well, so the rest of the Cardlan army still waiting miles back here, which I'm not sure why these reinforcements are this far back, like they can move a little bit further forward surely. There's also some units out here. Dorwinion sending their units through this little pass. Surely that's where their units should have been anyway. I don't know. I'm very confused about the opening of this battle, to be honest with you. There's no rhyme or reason to it. More Dorwinion units are making their way across now, though. Eldanan infantry taking hits from the crossbowmen in behind. I'm not convinced that this is enough either. Dorwinion need to apply overwhelming force to the situation, otherwise a combination of those Alcarondas legionnaires and the Balagaya pikemen are going to be good enough to keep a fair amount of Eldanan units at bay. Still, this is at least a little bit more like it, and they have managed to catch some crossbows in melee also, which weren't out of ammunition, so that will be good to get some kills on. There's a lot of routes that the attackers can take, in all fairness. Shari Stalkers trying to shoot across the way, Arthedain shadow bows trying to do what the Castamir's Rangers did, but instead they're being introduced to enemy Rangers, which is not really what they want. Arrows raining down from on high. Pharazim Swordmasters moving forward as well. It's been quite a messy fight so far, hasn't it? But to be fair, I think that will favour maybe the defenders. If individual units keep getting committed forward, then they can surround and overwhelm little pockets that the attackers do commit, and then eventually the attackers will find themselves in a situation where they simply don't have the manpower to beat what's left of the defenders. What is the fate of the Arthedain army that has been flanking around here for some time? Uhard warriors ready to block any advance up this hill. No advance over here just yet. Excuse me. Yeah, last recording that I'm doing of these of this little block, so my voice is very much on its last legs. Etanmor's Troll Hunters just in behind. Thieves of Tharb out of there. I mean, Cardlan are now moving forward, so it's about time, but again, I'm not sure why they've taken so long to get to this point. Morgfod are still waiting. Numenor have got another force that they can commit down here. Balagaya footmen are moving forward to just position themselves just so, but again, this is just one unit, so maybe the defenders have an opportunity once again to punish the attackers for only committing forward small numbers of units. I mean, Blackguard of Barad-dûr are not amazing in melee by any means, as I keep saying about Great Shield infantry units, but I think they would still be sufficient to defeat Balagaya footmen because the Spear Malice is such they wouldn't really be able to take advantage of the somewhat lackluster melee stats that the Blackguard of Barad-dûr actually have. But this of course changes matters somewhat. Pharazim Swordmasters far in excess of anything the Blackguard of Barad-dûr can hope to accomplish. So they're going to need some sort of support, maybe some Orc Javelins just to try and do some decent damage to these Numenorians as they try to make their way through Mordor's defences. Would be my suggestion. Seafarers of Nindamos moving forwards. Corsair infantry waiting, biding their time. Alcarondas Legion now retreating also. Corsair infantry firing a few crossbow bolts over. Or crossbow bolts. Arrows over. Many of them, however, embedding themselves in the dirt. So kind of a staggered retreat here from Umbar in some ways. I'm not sure whether they necessarily need to do a staggered retreat though. I mean, maybe this sort of increased pressure from the Dorwinion firing lines is what is bringing this on. I mean, the Corsair crossbows will really struggle under any kind of arrow fire, and Dorwinion's archers more than capable of picking them apart. Corsair Blackguards throwing in as well. Still though, these Elvalin not sufficient. And even the Balagai units, without the support of the Alcarondas Legion, will be able to deal with the remnants that have been left behind by the initial missteps. Cardolan, are they still pushing forward again? No more reinforcements have arrived since the Thieves of Tharbad in melee. The Dunedain captains easily able to mulch their way through Dunman spearmen. I mean, surely Rhudaur are aware of this. As you know, Dunman trying to leave. Not routing, but being pathed away, maybe trying to get them into a position where those Essenmoor's troll hunters can hit them from the side. Will Les McBurney fall for that? He won't. Not surprisingly. Arthedain captains haven't taken many losses at all, and they've killed plenty of low-end Rhudaur units so far. Still the crossbows as well. They're just stood right here with no reprisal coming from the archers. It's honestly one of the most bizarre battles I've seen. No one really has done what you would expect in a battle like this. Very, very unorthodox so far. Maybe you could say Numenor have, but I mean Numenor has still been fairly slow. I mean Arthedain have also been slow here. Like I would have pushed up here very, very quickly given the lack of units that are actually defending here. Rhudaur warriors, shields pointing the right way, but still the lower defensive abilities they have when it comes to dealing with arrow fire like this will come back to haunt them, I imagine. Plenty of Arthedain pikemen in here as well with Arthedain men at arms, so Arthedain will be claiming this ground eventually unless Harad can counter-attack or reinforce their lines or do something. And they are getting into position here. Serpent's Fangs firing away, taking a lot of damage actually from something. Is it from the Warns of the North? I suppose it must be. Interesting moment to use the Warns of the North. I mean, Serpent's Fangs are not the worst unit to use armor-piercing arrows on, I suppose. They're not a multiple HP unit, but they're good at melee, and they do represent a threat at range, but surely the bigger threat at range would be the Hashari Stalkers here, who are going to already be trying to do plenty of damage to that large blob of Arthedain soldiers gathering in the canyon. Harad don't do that well under arrow fire though, is being made apparent. And the high-ticket skirmishes from Harad now leaving the area. Not before taking a decent amount of damage though. What have we got here? Thieves of Tharbad, Arthedain captains still biding their time and waiting. The Thieves of Tharbad no longer have enough manpower in this unit to be able to take on a full strength unit of Dunman Spearmen just because of the numbers discrepancy, but 2 units of them sandwiching this very basic spear unit between them. That should be just fine. And Rhudaur will lose yet more of their low-end troops. Can they continue to take these kind of losses and hope to be victorious in this fight? I'm not so sure. What is this? There is a red arrow. Surely that is a routing unit. Indeed it is. One Blackguard of Barad-dûr surviving his brush with the Barazim Swordmasters. Of which, what have we got over here? Dorwinion moving forward, steadily turning up the pressure, but still Umbar won't be too concerned. I mean, Morroquendi Pikes, now Val and Hammerguard moving forward now that there is less of a ranged presence from Umbar, especially those crossbows are no longer around, either retreated or shot by the Dorwinion archers. And those pikes will make a big difference because the Morroquendi Pikes are a superior unit to the Belagaya pikemen, obviously having the armor-piercing heavyweight that is the Elvalin Hammerguard on the front line as well will deal with all of these basic, and even some of them, well, even the more elite Umbar troops, should they be recommitted, will struggle against such a thing. Yeah, and the Corsair Infantry, I mean, they do double as light infantry, but it's usually as a supporting tool for other infantry. A glorified meat shield, if you will. And that is not the case here. They're sort of on their own and having to deal with Morroquendi and even Elvalin. It's not going to go too well for them. Of course, our Blackguards moving back. If they still have a bit of ammunition, they will be hoping to make good use of that, but immediately you can see all of the Dorwinion archers starting to target them down, trying to blunt their effectiveness just a little bit as the arrows continue to fly. Let's see what Numenor are doing. With the commitment of the Farazim Swordmasters, they could start to make their way through this little raised canyon area over here. Still, the position hasn't changed necessarily. The Blackguard of Barad-dûr is still here. Numenorian cohort have been moved in as well. Orc Javelins. Farazim Swordmasters haven't taken too much in the way of damage, but I would imagine the Orc Javelins have at least tried to do their thing. Numenorian steel bows firing into the Arthedain shadow bows just in behind. I think Numenor so far have had the best engagement against their defender across the way. Mordor have struggled a little bit more to get to grips with the shape of this engagement in a very narrow canyon where quality is going to be king. Mordor need to get their ranged support into position, and I think Numenor have done a pretty good job at keeping that from being the case too much. There are Nazgûl in here, but they're going to need more support if they're going to be effective. I mean, one-on-one against individual swordmasters, the Nazgûl will win, but It's the problem with the Nazgul. It's always a very far cry from being a one-on-one fight whenever they are committed. Still, not much over here. Mordor's force ready for the Numenor advance, but I think the Wind Raider has played this very well for the time being. Still not much else happening here, you'd have to say. Still the same units committed. Still Rhudaur, I don't know, I mean Rhudaur are funneling kills into Cardolan somewhat over here. More Dunman Spearmen are going to be falling by the wayside. Rhudaur Swordsmen should be able to finish off those Thieves of Tharbad, I think, based on the numbers being what they are. Maybe not though. It'll be close, but that'll be another Rhudaur unit that has fallen. There's a unit of Ettenwall's Troll Hunters here. Taking cover, I think, from the Merc Crossbows, which so far have acted as a very good supporting unit, purely because Rhudaur haven't decided to shoot them with their own archers. Like, mercenary crossbows are so weak to arrow fire. It's their main weakness, and yet the defenders have decided not to do that, and allowed the crossbows to dictate where Rhudaur's javelins can position themselves while still being safe, which is a very, very peculiar tactic in my book. Harad have reinforced this area though, so Arthedain's progress up this little hill has been stymied. The Arthedain men-at-arms doing their best, but I mean individually, 1-to-1, I would back them against Muhard warriors, but given the terrain being what it is, given the numbers are what they are, one of the few units as well that Harad cannot really utilise for their armour piercing, because they don't have it. Meanwhile, Serpent's Fangs firing in. Poison arrows are nice, but like their base damage isn't particularly high, so all of these armoured Arthedain units are not going to take as much damage as they otherwise would, and with Wards of the North still in position, Unidine Rangers firing up the hill, Arthedain hoping to make some quicker progress by the looks of things now by using such a thing on Moonhard warriors. Shari Stalkers are also going to be returning the favour, I'm sure, though. Civilians getting into melee, they'll need a little bit of support because this is exactly the sort of fight the Muhard warriors will very much enjoy being a part of. Unfortunately, some professional soldiers are on the way forward as well. Harad now retreating under the pressure from the Arthedain skirmishes. Right, is this still progressing as it was here? Orc Maulers now moving in. How many Nazgul are left? 6. This is the Numenor General and the Pharazim Swordmaster, so there is that jeopardy potentially for Numenor. They won't suffer from the loss of a general as much as Mordor would, but it's still something to consider. Orc Maulers are armour piercing, but the discrepancy in quality between something like the Swordmasters and Orc Maulers is extremely high. Just in behind there's still Smardenheim Shadowbows from Numenor, who were hit fairly hard by the Mordor skirmishes across the way, but there you go. And now Mordor doing the same here. Olag High ready to be committed forward. I wouldn't do that now though, not with Pharazim Swordmasters there. They're a very good anti-troll unit to be sure. Well, what's going on over here? Umbar still holding the line over here, which is impressive in its own way. Narinari Royal Guard in position, heavy spears. I mean, they are very good at holding the line. That's pretty much their whole reason for being. Belagair archers, Corsair crossbows, both trying to do a lot of damage to Dorwinion, and they will succeed in doing so. I mean, this is where Dorwinion are now going to start to overwhelm this front line, but you have to ask the question, is it going to be worth the cost they're paying here? They need to get through this little infantry force more quickly than they're currently managing. Just commit everything forward, try and get some smaller units around the side perhaps to surround. Very depleted units of Morroquendi bows firing what's left of their ammunition in. Keldon River Patrol out of ammunition, so just being thrown in as extra bodies on the front line. Corsair fencers. They have a few projectiles they can use as well. They can cause more attrition for the ranks of Dorwinion. Belagair footman and Corsair fencers, though, looks like they're going to get into melee. I mean, the fencers are pretty good in melee, but I'm not sure. I think the melee fight here may be a lost cause. It's just a case of if you can do sufficient damage to Dorwinion before they can truly move forwards. Well, we'll return to that in a moment. Meanwhile, still some Rhudaur marksmen up here ready and waiting, but not doing an awful lot just yet. Thieves of Tharbad interestingly enough, despite being committed to melee, they still have some ammunition, so they're going to use that on the Rhudaur swordsman, succeeding in whittling down Hixgru's army even further. Surely this is going to be the end of the Thieves of Tharbad at this point. Still that unit of Ettenwall's Troll Hunters is waiting for their opportunity. Maybe now it is their opportunity. This is what they've been waiting for, surely, as the Dunedain captains poke their heads out. Yes, it is. Not a particularly full-blooded volley though, and now they can use the Rhudaur swordsman as a bit of rudimentary cover. There goes the Umbar general at the hands of Keldon River Patrol, no less. It's quite the scout for such a weak melee combatant. Crossbow's still there. Very depleted Rhudaur units. I mean, to be fair, as much as Rhudaur have lost a lot of units, they haven't lost a great deal of territory. Cardolan have just been slowly peeling away at relatively unimportant units, but when taken together, they make up too much of Rhudaur's army to really be disregarded completely. See the Demons of the Desert are here as well, ready to throw a volley or two into this little block of Arthedain units. There go the Muhard warriors. Are the Demons of the Desert going to be able to get a volley off? No, I mean, Darth was paying attention though, so he very quickly retreats his units from being caught in melee. And he's got plenty of melee units as well to block any further Arthedainian progress. Meanwhile, over here the civilians are routing. Some Southron warband on the front line alongside the Muhard warriors. A little bit of armor piercing does make a big difference. With a couple of units of them, it won't be the most fun engagement for the Arthedain men at arms, but in terms of sheer quality, they will still be able to do a lot of damage in return to the relatively fragile Haradrim spearmen. A little bit further back, what have we got going on? Still champions of Nathrat, dismounted Serpent Guard, all waiting, biding their time. And even further over here, still, Dorwinion have now managed to push through this area at least, and they're going to try and root out any further resistance over yonder with mostly out of ammo skirmishes, although are those the... that's just an officer. Of course, their fences being here means these out of ammo skirmishes will not be enough. They will need to commit something with a little bit more to them. Of course, our crossbowmen are just in behind the lines. Dorwinion trying to continue the assault forward, but with more Belagai pikes blocking the way. Do they have enough Morroquendi pikes to be able to win this fight? How much in the way of reinforcements do they have as well? Looking at this, it's not a huge amount. I think, I don't know, having a look at this, Corsair crossbows, Casimir's Rangers are still alive. Depending on what Umbar have left in the defensive positions further back, it's been a pretty bloody fight for both sides in this part of the map. We'll only be able to see who has truly come out on top of that when we get to the final stages of the battle, I think, and we see what Dorwinion and Umbar have left to contribute to such a fight. Numenor, meanwhile, now trying to move forward with more gusto. Temple Guard getting into melee, presumably having used up the rest of their ammunition. Some Morannon infantry as well. Olag High, I mean, Olag High are very good trolls, but you have to say that Numenor as a faction are going to be better at dealing with trolls in this context than most, because a lot of their infantry, their higher tier infantry, in some way is going to be able to do damage to the trolls pretty well. And you can see here that they seem to have fallen away pretty quickly. Obviously bad news for Mordor, they would have been hoping for a little bit more. But I guess it can't be helped. Elsewhere, victory is a distinct possibility. That's actually the same unit of shield guard which is in melee. I mean, what are Mordor going to be doing now? Are they going to try and retreat? Are the defenders in general going to retreat to the settlement at the back is what I would be curious about. It looks as though that's what Mordor wants to do, and Mordor should do that, to be honest, because they're not having a particularly great time against the Numenorians. It would also be the green light, I think, for Cardlin to finally move forward en masse. You know, Rhudaur swordsmen will be victorious against the Thieves of Tharbad, but at what cost? I assume, based on what I said at the beginning of the map, Rhudaur are the army that are fighting on home turf, given the human nature of the buildings at the back, even though the canyon itself would lend itself to a more dwarven style map. I'm sure there's something in Rhudaur I can find that would be fitting to name this battle after. Dunedain Troll Slayers in melee here alongside the Arthedain Pikemen. I mean, that's a serious unit. Their armour piercing won't be too useful against the Southron Warband, but the Southron Warband themselves are not going to be very good against Dunedain class units at all, and should be torn asunder. That will be a problem though. Demons of the Desert are waiting. A few of them have perished, but a few volleys from them carving through Troll Slayers and Pikemen. I'm sure Harad would be reasonably happy with that. Although they are going to fall back for the time being. Some Trollmen waiting, dismounted Serpent Guard. That is a good point. We haven't really seen a great deal of high-end units, certainly from Harad and Rhudaur, are utilised yet. Maybe a little bit more so. Umbar, I guess, and Mordor on the other side have committed more. Dismounted Serpent Guard moving in, blocking Arthedain's progress, but you can see the dismounted Knights of MINAS are in here. One of Arthedain's heavy hitters. Very, very solid unit of infantry. Difficult to deal damage to them without armour piercing. Some out of ammunition Southron archers just adding more numbers to the front line. Of course, they're not going to be up to much in melee, but just getting in the way at this point has its own value. What's going on here? A little bit of routing from Arthedain. Very depleted Arthedain men at arms. Some dismounted Fornoster Rhine Knights though. Dorwinion's general falls again to Corsair crossbows. So far the generals have been killed off by relatively weak units as we find, I don't know, it's looking very much like Dorwinion might be completely defeated by Umbar here, which is a big victory for the defenders, you'd have to say. Yes, Dorwinion gone. Taking too much damage here overall. Umbar utilising their skirmish as well. I mean, you have to say, I think this is all that Umbar have left, which is not a great deal. But they will take that, a victory over Dorwinion. They no longer have to worry about an attacker advancing down this pathway and circumventing a lot of the canyon defences to strike at the settlement directly. And Umbar can scrape together whatever they have left and come to the aid, I suppose, of Mordor, who the opposite is happening over here. Numenor are making good inroads against the Orcish faction on the field. A few Temple Guard have been left behind. Still, the Pharazim Swordmaster is very much alive. They have taken more damage since last time we saw them, but even still, solid unit this. That is the Mordor General as well, because Nazgul unit model, but it says Temple Guard, so can't imagine that he's going to last too much longer, but the Numenor General is right there as well, so both of them very much in danger now. More of a worrying loss that would be for Mordor though. Mordor still have their units in here, but I'm not sure. Arthedain losing half of their men. Still, almost all of the Cardolan forces are back here. They still have their trebuchet as well, the attackers. All of their artillery ammunition available to them. Still, the defensive position here of Rhudaur technically remains solid. That unit of Merc crossbows got hit by something. Are they waiting for Arthedain to claim this high ground over here before moving forward, so they've got a little bit of archer support on the approach? I mean, that's all well and good, but well, there goes Mordor in general. Good news for the attackers. As I was saying, that's all well and good, but Harad are putting up good resistance over here, so progress is slow, but steady, I suppose. Dunedain Rangers still have a bit of ammunition, as does this more depleted unit of Troll Slayers. A few javelins won't go amiss though as the battle grinds on. What have we got going on down here? Some Trollmen moving forwards now. Dismounted Knights of Numenor certainly doing the business against the dismounted Serpent Guard. And the Southron Archers obviously not doing very well against the dismounted Fornoster Rhine Knights and Dunedain Peacekeepers. This is a good opportunity, this actually, for Arthedain to get a good victory over here. Go around and start worrying the defenders from this position. You can see that the defenders are starting to retreat in several areas to the settlements at the back. Which is why I'm surprised Rhudaur in their initial positions are not doing the same. Arthedain marksmen shooting at some of the support in behind. Pretty perfect fight this for the Dunedain Peacekeepers and Fornoster Rhine Knights. I mean, it's going to be a little bit less perfect now that the Trollmen have arrived, but even so, just one unit of Trollmen, not a huge amount of support. If Arthedain sends forward another unit here, then it's going to be very difficult for the Trollmen to continue this. I mean, the Horns in the North in melee would be pretty damn good against the Trollmen, actually. Very few units can be efficient against them, given the kind of unit that they are. What do we have here? Looks like a more general advance now from the Arthedain units that were, looks like they're minesweeping almost for the main Cardlin advance, which is happening over here. Arthedain men-at-arms in numbers, dealing with the basic Rhudaur units that have been sadly left behind. Although they are actually shaken up here, the Arthedain units, maybe a little bit of a lack of support. Arthedain pikemen moving forward. Rhudaur clansmen are a decent defensive unit, but usually that has to come hand in hand with some sort of support, whether other melee units or ranged in behind. They're being left to their own devices here, which is something which the attackers can certainly exploit to their advantage. Mercenary crossbows. Still in position here. Still some units up there who have been taking pot shots. As more stronger today, you can see that the defenders are starting to move back to the settlement, but I think all of them need to be on the same page with this. I do think that Rhudaur generally in this fight have been pretty slow in terms of their movements. They really do need to see which way the wind is blowing here, however, otherwise they will be swamped while their allies are getting in position, and some of those Rhudaur units, pikes and berserkers and the like, will be very, very important to the defenders' chances of holding on to the settlement here at the back. Numenorian steel bows shooting at the temple executioners as they retreat. Less of them on the defence will be a tragedy for the defenders as well. Numenor so far doing everything correctly, you'd have to say. Now moving forwards. What's going on here? Umbar, what's left of their units. Moving into the canyon again. For what purpose? Are they going to try and hold this canyon over here? It's not really in the spirit of things, I would have thought. I'd have suggested that holding the settlement would have been more thematic than parking yourself in a narrow canyon, but c'est la vie. Champions of Nafrat moving backwards, so yeah, I think everyone now does get the memo, except maybe Rhudaur. Some of their units still not moving backwards. Cardlin moving forwards. I mean, Cardolan's army, ironically, has been even slower than Rhudaur's. Like, all of these units have just been stood around doing not much and not really in range of reinforcing either. Maybe worried that these Rhudaur archers would be able to take pot shots at them if they got too close, but it's a relatively poor excuse to have your whole army held up by a single unit of Rhudaur marksmen. What else do we have? Things are starting to get a little bit chaotic. Maybe a good opportunity here for the attackers. Numenor are now moving forwards. Numenor, I mean, this is the problem, because they are still transitioning across the battlefield now. It gives a good opportunity for the attackers to pick off more stragglers and have to deal with less resistance later. You know, Sauron's will would be so useful as well, given the armoured nature of the attackers mostly. Numenorian steel bows hitting them directly in the rear, although they are going to get engaged in melee line around on infantry, but steel bows should be more than tough enough to withstand this kind of foe. And now pushing forward with another unit of out-of-ammunition steel bows, some Serpent's Fangs making their way across, but again, this is a relatively healthy unit of Moranor infantry that they're going to lose because they decided to change their mind about their choice of final stand. I mean, I know that a narrow canyon may seem like the best call, but actually maybe not. I feel as though the best thing for the defenders, given what sort of skirmishes they have remaining, was to pick a position where their skirmishes would be at their best. I don't necessarily know if these narrow canyons are that. In terms of sheer quality, you would have to back the attackers. In a 4v4, they're going to have access to more high-quality units, as we've already seen in this battle. With Numenor versus Mordor, the high quality of the Numenor army really made life very difficult for Mordor in that narrow trench. And if the defenders willingly pick a position like that again for their last stand, I really feel as though this battle is going to end in an attacker victory. We'll see. If that is the case, you have to wonder who pulled rank and decided to, that was a good idea. Not to point fingers, but Umbar was the first one to begin moving across there. Arthedain Rangers starting to fire. I mean, they've been left behind somewhat. Is this a unit that's going to hunt them down? I guess technically it is, but mercenary crossbows, are they going to be enough? Cardolan Rangers now turning around. As they somewhat clumsily bump into the Rhudaur marksmen. I mean, this isn't really the kind of work that the mercenary crossbows are designed for, but needs must. The mass will do some of the work at the very least. Hitting them in the back there, mercenary crossbows will fall away without doing anything too significant to these archers, but the attempt was worth it, given that the Rangers were hitting the Arthedain army as it was moving forward. Are we actually seeing some movement from... No, we're not. Well, technically we did, but then they decided to stop. It's one of the most bizarre things I've seen. I really don't know what Les McBurney is thinking. That could cost his team the victory, honestly, if he's not careful, because if they do start to run out of steam here against the attacker's final stand, and his reinforcements are too far away to make a difference, like, that would be a tragedy. I do think, however, their decision to try and move to this narrow canyon system has cost the defenders far more than the attackers could now subsequently cost themselves. Not all of them were able to make it. Too many high priority units have been left behind and are ultimately going to be able to be dealt with. And yeah, getting a little bit too comfortable. Umbar back there. Trollman of Harad, I mean, doing well in melee as you would expect, but there's only so many of them. And Numenor continuing to be the mainstay of this attacking force. Problem here, of course, is without defending multiple angles over here, Arthedain are now going to be able to deal with the supporting units that Rhudaur have put in place to try and give a bit of a hand to the Haradrim units that were down there trying to make their way across. Well, there goes the Numenor general. That's something, I suppose, but he's already seen a lot of combat, so it's not too surprising, perhaps. Gwathlo Tracker's going to point-blank shoot the Cardolan pikemen in the back. Ooh, and they're getting shot down the line as well by Dunedain Rangers, so this is pretty much one of the neatest kill boxes that you'll ever see. Cardolan pikemen having to be left as a rear guard, but they can only cover so much of the map, so this was always going to end in tears for the Rhudaur pikes. Arthedain pikemen are there, Dunedain Trollslayers joining in, plenty of high-end units from Arthedain now also doing the same. Numenor taking a bit of damage here as a result, but Arthedain will arrive and then do the business. The announcer seems to agree that the attackers in the ascendancy now, Etenwar's Troll Hunters fleeing, Reforged Javelins going to have to engage in melee. Last time we saw them though, they actually performed quite well in melee, but I don't know whether they're going to have the abilities overall now to turn the tide. We do have a bit of a rout, however, from Numenor. Seafarers of Nimdamos being killed off by Cardolan Berserkers, so Numenor may very well actually be falling. But their sacrifice was worthwhile because it has made the defenders' job significantly harder. Cardolan Berserkers will be enough to finish off the Seafarers though. What on earth are Cardolan doing? I'm genuinely confused as to what's going on back here. All of these units being useless, including very important ones like the Manatar Romain Gatekeepers. It's more pikes, crossbows in general. The Trebuchet, which, to be fair, the Trebuchet is another unit and another reason why, as the defenders, I really don't think that posting up in a position in these narrower canyons is ultimately worthwhile, because as soon as that Trebuchet gets into a position where it can hit your defensive lines, you're doomed. It can scarcely miss. Reforged Javelins continuing to do their thing, swinging their spiky clubs, but there's simply too many Arthedain units, and while they may be multiple HP, statistically they are certainly not the most defensive unit, so as soon as they start taking damage, it's a bit of a cascading failure situation that they have to endure. Plenty of bloodied Arthedain soldiers, but you can see these skirmishes now in position. Dunedain Rangers, a couple of units of Gwathlo Trackers shooting across the way as well. Where are they? Are they going after... No, they're going after the more elite Rhudaur units, which is fair enough. More kills, more damage inflicted. It's a very bizarre fight this again. We might see a lull in proceedings here actually, while Cardlin have to try and play catch up. There is no alternative. Arthedain won't be able to attack on their lonesome. Arthedain men-at-arms are actually shaken here, taking point-blank hits from the Rhudaur Rangers, and this is another unit actually that the Rhudaur Rangers will be able to deal with completely. Now that's a lot of damage. Rhudaur Rangers will move in. Defeat is a distinct possibility for the Arthedainians. There's simply not enough of them left to kill off the Rangers in melee any longer. Unorthodox play by most players on this battlefield, like I said, so it's kind of hard to tell which of these will actually end up paying off in the long run. This is one that I don't think will, because if Cardlin had simply moved forward their forces en masse earlier with Arthedain and Numenor, I feel as though the attackers, or the defenders rather, would have been roundly punished for what they have chosen to do. And just having a look at what they have left: Orc Archers, Champions of Nafrat are strong, and again a lot of these units are fairly depleted. Serpent's Fangs, unit of Sauron's Will, which is fairly healthy, Trollmen, which are a bit depleted, Temple Executioners. I mean, some strong units, but also a lot of them look very battered and bruised. I'm not entirely sure what's going on here either. I mean, you've got Merc Crossbows continuing to try and hunt these units down. This is where having a unit of more traditional cavalry would have come in handy. They still have ammunition, so I don't know why they got so close. They can simply get away with going on fire at will and shooting these elite Rhudaur units down. But it is what it is, I suppose. Lothling still biding their time, still waiting. Wathlo trackers trying to get in here to return fire into the Castamir's Rangers. I mean, Wathlo trackers at this point not the most important unit. If you can cut down those Rangers, it would be a worthwhile trade. Cardlan are now arriving, but again, they appear to be just sort of posting themselves up over here. Are they waiting for the Trebuchet to move forward as well? Getting ready in place. I think actually this is something which merits ×2 where we can. Orc Archers returning fire over there. I mean, to be fair, the Orc Archers have actually been pretty efficient in this situation. It may not be the unit that you choose to be a part of your final stand contingent, but Mordor have to work with what they have left following their savaging at the hands of Numenor, although they have managed to outlive Numenor in this battle overall, so Tintin will have the last laugh in that regard, I suspect. Still though, Numenor's still trying to do the business against Mordor. You can see they're already shaken as a result. Mordor's loss of general means their lower end units certainly will be more fragile as this battle continues. Looks like they're now going after the Minhiriath sharpshooters. They continue to advance, they are now wavering. This might be the end of them. It looks like they just ran out of ammunition though, so Tintin won't mind too much. In fact, if they take up a bit more ammunition, that would probably be worthwhile. Minhiriath sharpshooters moving forwards, Orc Archers which are routing. Wathlo trackers are still shooting, but at what? Nothing for the time being. More difficult to use your ranged units in this position, I suppose, but I mean, really, the attackers are waiting on Cardlin to commit their units forward here, which is, it's starting to get, honestly, if I was playing in this battle, I'd be getting very frustrated with Cardlin at this stage. Commit to your units. They are gathering dust. What have we here? Seafarers and Mindamos are still chasing down what very little remains of the Rhudaur army. I don't know if the Seafarers will be able to beat Rhudaur Berserkers. I don't think they will. With javelins they might. I don't know if they actually killed off any of the Berserkers there. No, Rhudaur Berserkers would win that fight easily. Seafarers in Damos are already shaken for a start. And they only have an advantage of 5 combatants, which is not enough when the quality has that high of discrepancy. Bandits are moving forward, Dunedain Peacekeepers thinking about being the first infantry unit in. We're heading towards the final 10k frames, which would suggest that the attack is about to finally get underway, and the final phase of the battle, the final stand, can truly begin. At least we can hope. Is this it? Watlow trackers taking hits from the Castamir's Rangers as they make their way up this canyon. Defensive position looking solid, but again these units rout almost immediately because they're not going to achieve anything. These are very depleted, out of ammo skirmishers who have seen a lot of combat. Of course they're going to run away. Bandits moving forward, a bit of javelin action. Would certainly not go amiss. Some Dunedain peacekeepers are there. Bandits already shaken, again without support. Trying to do this one by one approach is really not paying off. They will be able to finish off the Castamir's Rangers, I think, but not before the Castamir's Rangers do more horrendous damage. Probably the unit on the field, I would imagine, which has got the most singular amount of kills, but that will be brought to an end now by these Dunedain. At long last is probably what the attackers are thinking, but they could have dealt with the situation a little bit sooner. What's going on back here? Mercenary crossbowmen are still there, biding their time and waiting. Some seafarers of Nindamos taking the long route round. Some Watlow trackers which are routing, some Dunedain Rangers which are also routing. Right, the Rhudaur bodyguard units are still here as well. I mean, those seafarers could, I guess, contribute, but I think they're just going to perish. There's one Witchram Enslaver left, and fortunately for Rhudaur, I suppose, it is their general. Right, so this fight. Finally we have the genuine melee engagement that we were waiting for. As the Dunedain peacekeepers leave and flee. Javelin on javelin violence. What javelin unit is that actually? Is it Orc Javelins? Orc Javelins and Bandits are very similar to one another in terms of what they actually offer. Orc Javelins being spears in melee though might actually be a unit which all round is more useful more of the time. I'm not sure. I shall leave that up to you to decide. Temple Executioners in melee. They're doing a good job. The Wards of the North are moving forward though. Again, it's Arthedain doing most of the heavy lifting, with Cardlan still indulging in their favourite hobby of lining up their units and being absolutely useless throughout most of this battle. If Arthedain's attack here falls apart, Cardlan will have to do something because they will be the only attacker with any kind of firepower left on the field to be able to try and dislodge the defenders from the position they've taken up. Javelins being flung. I mean, I guess, you know, Arthedain here, it is a scary force. Troll Slayers and Wardens of the North. Both in melee, the sort of thing which is difficult to stop, especially with sufficient support, more Dunedain units in the Peacekeepers, the dismounted Fornos Knights as well. I guess we'll count the Bandits among the units offering their aid as well. Even though they've been savaged already by the defending Javelins. It has been a very bizarre battle though, hasn't it? Not the sort that we see the like of very often. Serpent's Fangs are here, firing at something. One Arthedain Shadow Burst, they're being finished off. I mean, Champions of Nafarat and general units of Trollmen. That must be Numenor, because that would have been the last Arthedain Shadowbow to die. But yeah, I mean, with Trollmen committed down here, things might be a little bit different, although it is mostly Dunedain, isn't it? So their dominance wouldn't be quite as apparent. Again, I think this is a ×2 type situation. The defenders have elected to make this battle a very narrow choke point fight, so there's only so much I can say about it here in the late game. I mean, rightly so, I suppose. Well, there goes the Rhudaur General, shot at point blank range. I will say, however, that I think taking up this position and transitioning their units across the field has ultimately ended up costing them too much. They managed to kill off Numenor in the process, but they themselves lost an awful lot of units in the doing. I think, anyway. That would be my assessment. Cardlan moving forward, their Minotaur, Roman Gatekeepers. I mean, with a unit like this, like the attackers should still win. Regardless of how slow Cardlan have been to commit their units, and how filtering in units one by one is one of my pet peeves, and that's exactly what they have been doing this whole time. Ultimately, they still have too much left in the bank where the defenders just don't have enough, so that would be what I would say. The Serpent's Fangs firing missiles. They've been a fairly effective unit throughout this battle as well. They've been getting involved fairly consistently since the initial Arthedain advances on the Harad defensive positions, as they were at the start of the battle. Some Dunedain captains moving forward as well, in and amongst the Arthedainian Dunedain, blending right in with their similar attire. The vanilla outfit for the battle-ready Dunedain as they were back in the day still lives on in the Cardlan roster. There go the Orc Javelin. So yeah, I mean, this is going to be the end, isn't it? Harad really the only army with much of anything left. If we had to kill off a few more, I mean, it should end up being... I mean, it's a fairly close battle. Just over the 10% mark in favour of the attackers, but like I said, a very weird battle as well. I do feel as though that was a big mistake that the defenders made, moving across over to here a little earlier on. It might have seemed like a good idea at the time, a nice narrow choke point to block them up, but I don't think they considered the fact that even if it did come down to a pure melee fight like this, the quality advantage was in favour of the attackers, so you needed to pick a position which was better for your skirmishes. Casimir's Rangers did okay out of this little defensive position, but no other unit really did, you'd have to say. So shall it be? What's going on over there? Minotaur, Roman Gatekeepers. Still firing. Dealing with what little support they have left. I mean, surely the Demons of the Desert will be first port of call for that, and indeed they are. The Trebuchet not even used either, so you have to say it was what it was. It was, again, there's so much to unpack about this battle overall. The bizarre way in which most of the players played this. Dorwinion, Umbar played it more or less as you would expect. I mean, they did pretty well actually, all things considered. Dealing with Dorwinion, as unorthodox as that advance was. Numenor did well against Mordor. The other side, though, Arthedain with a reasonably slow advance, Harad matching them blow for blow mostly. But really, that Cardlan versus Rhudaur lane is something which I think has thrown the whole battle off kilter, really. It was just such a bizarre thing. And it's informed how the rest of the battle has gone, but still, the two good aligned Arnori and Petty Kingdoms will be the only ones with anything left standing at the end, and most of those, you'd have to say, will be Cardlan units, as the Dunedain slowly but surely chop their way through these champions of Nafarat which remain. My garrison footmen are here, arriving on the front line, some cheap pikes, some bandits. I mean, a lot of what Cardlan have left, which is skewing the numbers somewhat in their favour. 13% the difference at the moment, but lower end units which are more numerous, which were never committed to the fight, so in terms of margin of victory, I wouldn't say that this is all that different to a sub 10% victory, really. And again, this is not sure you can use conventional metrics to really measure this battle by because of how strange it was. Taking some hits from the Corsair Fencers, the Serpent's Fangs and Shari Stalkers actually firing in. That might actually be enough to bring it into the sub 10 category if they manage to get a few volleys here. They'll kill off a lot of Greenway Garrison footmen. Wardens of the North, victory seems certain, only a fool could lose this battle. The Serpent's Fangs. Not as damaging as the Hashari, which is why the Hashari are being prioritised here. Yes, just run through and finally finish them all off. One Castamir's Ranger remains from Son of the Dunedain. Continuing to try and do that damage, but finishing off Umbar. So Harad will be the final defender left standing. This one unit of Serpent's Fangs will fight to the bitter end. Was that enough to bring it into 10%? No, not quite. 12% the difference. That's close enough. And given, as I mentioned, the rather strange way in which this battle has played out, I don't think that's too much of a problem. The Serpent's Fangs are dealt with. Those Greenway Garrison footmen. Is the Trebuchet still down there? Yes, it is. A few other units as well. Loitering with intent. Cardlin will be the ones with more of an army left, so I guess they can... Given where Rhudaur is, though, this would probably be absorbed into Arthedain rather than Cardolan, depending on where it is. This has a more northern feel to it, after all.
Victory is ours, but only by a sword's edge.
Yeah. Weird. A weird fight, to say the least. But yeah, it was what it was. I think, you know, Son of the Dunedain of the defenders can certainly hold his head up high, given how he dealt with Dorwinion, was also one of the cornerstones of the efforts in the late game. I will say that if it was his idea to move over to this position in the late game, I really don't agree with that move, because it cost them too much to get over here. Even if you think that it was a better place to stand than the settlement, it costs too much to move your armies over here. You know, Arthedain and Numenor were able to exploit the transitional phases, as attackers often can, and yeah, it ended up not working out for the defenders. So that is something. Again, it's more of an accusatory thing here. I don't have any proof, but based on the fact that his units were over there and he moved the rest of his army over there first, I can assume it was his idea. But you know, it is what it is. Ultimately, I do think that he played rather well. Anyway, Mordor struggled against the Numenor army. Again, based on the terrain they were in, the quality of Numenor really did pay off. It's not the first time in the past month or so we've seen Mordor struggle in that kind of environment against Numenor. Mordor need to not engage against such a faction in that kind of area, unless they have the ideal position to offer support with Temple Guard or Orc Javelins or something like that, which ultimately they did. And it is what it is. Harad did pretty well against Arthedain initially. They slowly got pushed back in the way that we often see in sort of more traditional siege battles, where the defenders start to lose ground eventually. If they had been able to use their Trollman at some point earlier against Arthedain, maybe if they bulked up their defensive positions earlier, maybe things could have been a little different, but we'll never know now. Rhudaur, along with Cardolan, were the two armies, like I said, which played this battle very weirdly. Rhudaur largely static. It reminds me, honestly, of the name escapes me. How can I forget the name of the player who parks himself in position and almost refuses to move in field battles? He almost always plays the same way. He's infamous, and the name is completely gone. It's blanked. But it reminds me of that, only in a siege battle. It was bizarre. And obviously Cardolan very, very slow, to the point of, you know, it being extreme. It didn't cost the attackers too much in the end, but it could have done if the defenders maybe hadn't made, you know, the error, is it the right word? I don't know, but if they hadn't been caught between Numenor and Arthedain as they were moving across to their final stand position, it really could have cost the attackers quite dearly, the dawdling from Cardolan. Dorwinion struggled against Umbar. They actually still got a fair amount of kills. If they had been a little bit more aggressive a little bit earlier, I think Umbar would have been in real trouble, but in the end that is the difference between ultimately Umbar playing well and being, you know, the cornerstone of the defence, or crumbling and Dorwinion attacking from this side and making, you know, this final stand area unviable. Numenor, I think, was probably the best player for the attackers. Kill counts being what they are is one thing, but I do think Numenor's progress against Mordor was very important, and also informed the initial retreat from the defenders, which, you know, made a big difference, obviously. And then Arthedain themselves, who got a lot of kills against Rhudaur, against Harad, and then in the late game, of course, they were very important to being the sort of vanguard, as it were, given how slow Cardolan were being. So yeah, ultimately, hard to quantify this, but let's see what did the damage for Arthedain. Plenty of kills on Wards of the North and Dismounted Knights of Numenor, so the elites certainly doing their thing. Unit of Troll Slayers, you know, above not doing so well, but still. Peacekeepers again, differing fates, one doing acceptably, one not so much. Arthedain men-at-arms actually doing very well. Dismounted Fornoster Rhine Knights kind of acceptable, I think you'd say. Arthedain pikemen, you can't really judge them on kills because they're not really built for that sort of thing, they're built more as an anchor. Dunedain Rangers, 166 isn't much, but then, well, 4 Rangers, but they are an attacking force, so you don't expect them to get tons of kills. Just a few good volleys to force the defenders to move is something which you can't really measure by kills. Arthedain Marksmen, Evandem Archers, civilians not doing too badly either than they were up against more basic Harad units, and they did have a bit of support, so there you go. Either way, big thank you to Winged Swordsman 44 for sending this one in. I think I only have one more from the initial group of replays that he sent to me, and that is on Bersergath, so it might still be a couple of weeks before we see that one, just to try and give it a little bit more time. Bersergath seems to have supplanted Thranduil's Halls as it was in the last patch, which is the one that people send fairly continuously. I mean, it's a popular map for good reason, but there's only so often I can show it before it starts to get stale, so we will be showing it, but it'll still probably be a couple of weeks away. Still, there's the spectre of the live stream channel update, which I want to do at some point during the summer once I have a little bit more of an idea of what's actually going to be happening. Again, the eternal question, it seems. As for other things, there is also going to be the return of the knockout tourney videos, which should be arriving. I mean, at this point I have managed to get myself to be 3 weeks in advance once again, so hopefully that will be happening within the week after this one, a week, 2 weeks perhaps, and we'll be doing some manner of infantry. Possibly shock infantry, I think, based on what I think would be good. Yeah, and other than that, the standard replays between Silmarillion and Reforged will continue. So, yeah, I won't ramble for too long after this one. Basically, it's as you were in terms of the plans. Things will continue to move as they are. The can gets kicked down the road, as it were, but the road only has so much length. So hopefully, hopefully we will be able to make some more sturdy plans with regards to the channel in the very near future. Either way, big thank you to Winged Swordsman 44 once again for sending me all these battle replays. They've certainly filled up at least a month and a half with, mostly a month and a half anyway, with good content. So hopefully there will be more to come in the future. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.